Hey everybody, Rick Manning, President Americans for Limited Government here. Today we're going to show you a part of Tucker Carlson's speech, the one he gave right before he was fired by Fox News in front of the Heritage Foundation. And then we're going to follow up with a clip of Ronald Reagan from 1964, not long ago, where he lays out what's at stake in his famous time for choosing speech. Tucker Carlson broke a cardinal rule of the left. He defined the attack on nature and biology as an attack on humanity. Binary good and evil. Listen to this.
None of this makes sense in conventional political terms. When people or crowds of people, or the largest crowd of people at all, which is the federal government, the largest human organization in human history, decide that the goal is to destroy things, destruction for its own sake. Hey, let's tear it down. What you're watching is not a political movement, it's evil. So if you want to assess, and I'll put it in I'll stop with this. I'll put it in non-political, non-specific theological terms, and just say, if you want to know what's evil and what's good, what are the characteristics of those? And by the way, I think the Athenians would have agreed with this. This is not necessarily just a Christian notion. This is kind of I would say, widely agreed upon understanding of good and evil. What are its products? What do these two conditions produce? Well, good is characterized by order, calmness, tranquility, peace, whatever you want to call it, lack of conflict, cleanliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. It's true, it is. And evil is characterized by their opposites. Violence, hate, disorder, division, disorganization, and filth. So if you are all in on the things that produce the latter basket of outcomes, what you're really advocating for is evil. That's just true. I'm not calling for a religious war, far from it. I'm merely calling for an acknowledgement of what we're watching, which is not one, and I'm certainly not backing the Republican Party. I'm not making a partisan point at all. I'm just noting what's super obvious. Like, those of us who are in our mid-50s are caught in the past in the way that we think about this. One side's like, no, I've got this idea, and we've got this idea, and let's have a debate about our ideas. They don't want a debate. Those ideas won't produce outcomes that any rational person would want under any circumstances. Those are manifestations of some larger force acting upon us. It's just so obvious. It's completely obvious.
Wow, that's just amazing. Now let's listen to Ronald Reagan explain the fight for good and evil in a broader context way back in October of 1964. Now, this is amazing to me. This is an almost 60-year-old speech, but when you see it, you're gonna feel it like it was today. At a time when Barry Goldwater led the fight for individual liberty against a dramatically growing federal government, and a nation in mourning over the murder of JFK was going to vote with our hearts to erase the events of November 22, in the hopes of erasing the events of November 22, 1963, by anointing his successor, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Here's what Ronald Reagan had to say.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said, if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course.
Wow. I wish our modern day politicians could emulate, could say it the way Ronald Reagan did. Truly the great communicator. It's amazing how far we've fallen. It's just astonishing how far we've fallen that speech by Ronald Reagan, we could play it today, but we'd have a totally different context behind it because we've had a whole great society since then. We spent trillions upon trillions of dollars expanding the federal state, expanding our state governments, expanding the power and control of unions, public employee unions who don't have the interests of the public at heart. They have the interest of their own power at heart. We're at war against the actual parents who seek to try to protect their own children from a public education school system that they pay for. It's just astonishing. But the battle's still there to be won. Americans still believe in individual liberty. Americans still believe in freedom, the Constitution, God, and the government closest to the people serves the people best. Americans still distrust the Anthony Faucis of the world who would dictate and abuse freedom from DC, abusing the very nature of scientific debate to enforce power and control for him and his cronies. Americans reject those who would institutionalize child abuse through public institutions, destroy freedom of thought and speech through spying, debanking, and jailing those who oppose the government-determined narrative. Americans know our nation is headed in the wrong direction. They tell pollsters every single day that America's in the wrong direction, but they just don't know what to do about it. It seems like the power is so far away that it's been taken, that we're being dictated to daily about different things. And we shake our head and we say, how did things get so far out of control? First, let's understand a basic truth. The power in America is still in the people's hands. The power in America is still in the people's hands. Remember, our nation is a nation where the people are constitutionally designed to be the leaders, not the elected few, not the bureaucrats who reign roughshod over freedom in a quest to consolidate power and control. The people, individuals, you hold the power. The elected officials are sheep looking for a shepherd. They're sheep looking for a shepherd. They need to be told what they need to do. They're so close to the fire that they can't see the edges of it. They don't feel the actual heat because they've become used to it here in DC, where every answer has to be a Washington, D.C. solution, as opposed to one that frees people to create the solutions. Be a shepherd. They want you to be sheep. They're the sheep. You're the shepherd. You have the power. You have the vote. But we can't do it as individuals. An individual, when you get in a boxing match, you don't sit there and poke somebody, because that's ineffective. It just irritates people and they may laugh at you. But if you take your 5 fingers and you put them into a fist and you punch them, that has an impact. So as individuals, we have to join together with like-minded people. So we form not just one fist, but thousands of fists that are beating the heck politically out of the administrative state, out of those who would tear our freedoms away, those who would rule us against our will. we have a job to do. We need to come together so that we can be and restore order in America and become the America who we grew up to believe in and that we still aspire to be. What can you do about it? It's simple. We're Americans for Limited Government. Every day we fight this fight. We're small, but we win battles that matter. And it's hard work. But truthfully, we win battles because people like you join hands with us and help close that fist. So the punch from a small group becomes disproportionately powerful because the number of people who have curled their fingers into a ball so they have a fist. Americans for Limited Government is easy to do. It's free. Just subscribe. Go to dailytorch.com and subscribe. It's free. You're going to get information. Once a week or so, we'll send you something about it. Take action. That's something that matters in this fight. And it's up to you then to make that matter. We can send you what we think needs to be done. It's up to you to do it and share it. And come back to us if you think it's the wrong approach and tell us, hey, we really think you should be fighting this battle over here. Or we think that this should have been written this way. We're amenable to that. Because ultimately, the American people have the power to right the ship. We don't have to accept that America is going in the wrong direction. It's our job to make it so this country is going in the right direction. We've had transformational leaders in this country, and I'm going to name maybe five transformational leaders from the 20th century. Teddy Roosevelt was a transformational leader in that he grew government, and he took on the power brokers through trust busting, and took on those who were driving government decisions based on their own pocketbook concerns, and so he was a trust buster. Woodrow Wilson got elected largely because the Republicans at the time, after Teddy Roosevelt, when Teddy Roosevelt was running for president and won the primaries, the Republicans decided that they were going to continue with the then incumbent William Howard Taft and put him on the ballot. Roosevelt ran as a third party, and we got stuck with Woodrow Wilson. During Woodrow Wilson, people think about Woodrow Wilson and they basically say, oh, maybe World War I. During Woodrow Wilson, we got the income tax added into the Constitution. We had the senators become directly elected as opposed to elected by the states, effectively diminishing the power of states to be able to dictate federal policy. We had the Federal Reserve created to create a national bank to help us not be in a recession and to stabilize our money, which if just a few years later, they threw us in the greatest depression in U.S. history because they got it all wrong. We have Woodrow Wilson was the single most disastrous president in the history of the United States. That's just true. Transformational. FDR, then after we ended up in the Great Depression, FDR came in and put the institutions of the United States into place, the administrative state into place, that then empowered unelected bureaucrats to dictate every aspect of your life. Ronald Reagan stood up and fought against that and had some victories, but truthfully, he didn't have a Congress. He won the Cold War, but he wasn't able to win the domestic war because he didn't have a Congress. And then we had Donald Trump, and who came in the 21st century, obviously. Donald Trump, who said, certainly less articulately than Ronald Reagan did, that the only way we could actually win was to drain the swamp. Donald Trump was right. It just was a lot harder than he thought. Join us, and we will drain the swamp. We will restore power to the people, and we will restore America to a beacon shining on the hill that Ronald Reagan described for the rest of the world to say, that's what we aspire to be, as opposed to being a country where people like the French and even the government of Solomon Islands said, we will not allow your Navy to dock here because we're trying to do a deal with the Chinese. Let's take a look at some of the comments. Trying to. Okay. I'm looking at Michael Lasewski. He's always got good stuff. Going back, rereading history. Republicans created equal rights for all humans. And the very first mention color separation between us came out the mouths of Democrats and turned it into prejudice. When I look, that's true. One of the interesting things is when you go into when you look at the Bible, and a lot of people point to Paul and his essentially apolitical way of saying, don't go to war over slavery. But the fact of the matter is, we know that in the book of Philemon, Onesimus, who was a slave, came to Paul while he was in prison, and he wanted Paul to send a letter back to, basically said, tell him that he'd done the right thing to run away. And Paul instead sent a letter back with Onesimus and said, take this to Philemon. Onesimus did. We know what's in the letter because we got the letter, and we know what the outcome was. Onesimus ended up becoming not only freed because of Paul's letter, but he also ended up becoming a bishop in the church, in the Christian church. So Christianity is where the roots of freedom, the roots of empowerment existed. One thing it's really astonishing to me because people are cherry picking. They don't really understand. They don't put things into context. But the bottom line is, when God said, Paul asked when he was had to choose whether to go towards Asia or into Europe in his first mission trip. And he wanted to go to Asia. And he was told by God, no, turn left. You're going to meet somebody down by the river. So who do you meet down by the river? A woman, a wealthy woman who is leading a Bible study, essentially. Lydia. The first person who Paul, on his first mission trip, the first person who he and Barnabas met and became converts was a group led by a wealthy woman. Equality is a Christian quality. Those who seek to end Christianity, those who seek to attack Christianity, those who seek to attack Christianity in America, those who seek to attack the concept that there is good and evil, that truth is truth. Those are the people who want inequality in the most base way. They want inequality of them having power and the rest of the people being dependent upon them. Never forget, big government is designed to control people. It's not designed to be controlled by people. And that's why we're Americans for Limited Government. Let's see another one. Tucker Carlson's Heritage Foundation speech. Okay, here's a link to the whole speech, which I think is worth doing. We just cherry picked it, but I think it's really worth going to it. Glenn Greathouse, yeah, we need to stick together. Like I say, it's a fist, and if we are, and the more fingers that are closed in this fist, the stronger it is, the more powerful the punch, and the more capacity we have to restore this country to who it needs to be. The bottom line, the hopeful part of this is Americans get this. And while they may not know what to do, they may feel frustrated, they may sit there and say feel disenfranchised. It's up to us to bring them hope that we can, in fact, win this battle. In fact, we must. In some respects, Fox firing Tucker Carlson empowers him. And not that he wasn't pretty empowered before, but It tells us that people who once watched Fox now sit there and say, look with skepticism at it. That takes the firing of Tucker Carlson actually takes the power away from Paul Ryan and the Murdochs and Karl Rove, because the people who were listening to Fox and were paying attention to it, now understand what the corporate structure is. Now understand that it's an ESG run organization that agrees with the same exact principles as the left. According to the corporate documents, they believe in equity, not equality, equity, meaning equal outcomes, not equal opportunity. Yeah, it's not me. It's their corporate documents. It's what they say they believe in. So the freeing of Tucker Carlson, the freeing of Dan Bongino from a corporate structure that is at war with the very principles they espouse is a good thing, because they were bringing eyeballs to a corrupt entity that disavowed the principles that the people on air were fighting for. So something new will come of that, and something new that will be driven by a quest for truth and a denial of the falsehoods of the left, who want you to believe that up is down and down is up and east is west, west and west is east, that all power comes from the barrel of a gun, rather than being that truth is absolute, rather than the only absolute being who holds the most ammunition and can shoot better. Let's see here. Let's take a look at this. I'm having a hard time reading there. It's pretty small. Louisiana conservatives. Oh, by the way, Helen, you should know this. There's a new Freedom Caucus in the Louisiana House of Delegates, House of Representatives. I'm sorry, that's being stood up, and it's going to be a powerful voice and really important in terms of paying attention to. The person who is the executive director is a woman named Connie Hare, a personal friend of mine. She was the chief of staff for Louis Gohmert, so you know she's great. And they are going to be aggressively involved in trying to make certain that the people of Louisiana understand that when they are voting for somebody, that person's either going to be standing for liberty or not, regardless of partisan labels, and will help, hopefully help create an environment where I'm not endorsing any candidates here, but where the current Attorney General of Louisiana might have a reasonable opportunity to become the governor. Let's see here. I'm going to just tell you guys, I'm having a hard time reading these, but I'll take another one from Mike, and then we need to go. It seems like they campaign for we the people, then when they totally disregard what they campaign for, then turn their own greed against the American people. That is true. I'm going to point to a book. Hold on, it's back here somewhere. This is a book by Jim Jordan. Okay, I'm going to hold it up. Let's get it in the camera. Find out how to get in the camera. Where's the camera? There it is. Okay. Do What You Said You Would Do by Jim Jordan. Fighting for Freedom in the Swamp. Okay. What you said, Mike, is what Jim Jordan writes in his book. And what I will tell you, I was talking to a good friend of mine, a close personal friend. We're both lobbyists at the National Rifle Association. Same time, he's on ALG's board of directors. I was in his wedding, so we're friends. And he was the chief of staff for a member of Congress, and they were voting for the standard Boehner garbage way back when. And I was giving him grief and publicly giving him grief from ALG. And I went to meet with him, and back then, we were in this like cage that they turned into in the 6th floor or 5th floor of Cannon, that they turned into a meeting room. And he's just yelling at me because I won't get on board with whatever garbage they were doing. And I finally had enough. I got red hair and I get mad. We were friends. And I said to him, just go get your campaign brochure. Go take a look at your campaign brochure and do what you said you were going to do there. You said you were going to cut government. You said you were going to cut spending. You said you were going to do all those things. And now you're yelling at me because I'm trying to hold you accountable to your campaign brochure. The people are going to hold you accountable to the campaign brochure. You darn well better start doing it. And then we went our separate ways, and we probably didn't talk again for about 3 months. But point is, the people need to demand that your legislators do what's in their campaign brochure. We saw at the beginning of this House of Representatives, 20 representatives stand up and say, we're going to do what's in our campaign brochure. We're going to fight for America. We're not going to sit there and do just whatever we're told by whoever happens to have power. And those 20 stood up and they won. Kevin McCarthy's a better speaker because they did. There's problems there's still problems. There's always going to be problems. People are people. Politicians are politicians. But because those 20 had the courage to stand up, America has a chance in this session to fight back against the craziness of the left and the Biden administration. If every single one of those 20 is going to be targeted and is being targeted, some have politically, some have easy re-elections, some are going to have really hard re-elections. But one way you can show solidarity with those people who stood up and fought for America, fought for freedom, fought to be able to fight for your rights on the floor of the House. The way you can help them is go and take a look at their websites, their campaign websites. And if you like what you see, help them out. K Street's not going to. K Street didn't like this. K Street doesn't want fights over your freedom. K Street wants fights over whether they're going to get tax breaks or not. They want fights over how they can jab their competitors and get a competitive advantage. They want fights over how to spend more money, not how to spend less money. Because when you're a corporate crony, spending more money means more money into your pocket. And when you're a corporate crony, spending less money means less money in your pocket. They stood up and fought against that. Go take a look at who the 20 are. Go to their campaign websites. And if you like what you see, help them out if you can. Or send them a note of encouragement, because it's a lonely place in America, in DC, to be standing, fighting for freedom, when everybody else around you is fighting for a piece of the pie that comes out of your pocket, not theirs. I'm going to leave you at that. I just join us. Go to dailytorch.com and share. Make this thing go viral. People need to hear at least the message from Tucker and Ronald Reagan, if not the rest of this. So with that, I thank you, and we are going to sign off.